Welcome back to Calculus 1. This is problem number 2 from homework set number 5. The solution to this is 2 times the square root of 13 divided by 3. So let's go ahead and see how we get that value.
We've got 2 points, P and Q, and we need to determine the distance that is 1/3 from P to Q. So the picture of that looks something like this. Here's the point P, here's the point Q. There's some distance, and if we split this distance up into threes, here's 1/3, here's 2/3, and of course to get to Q it's 3/3. So we need to find this distance right here, this point that is 1/3 of the distance from P to Q. So how are we going to do that? Well, first we should figure out the overall distance from P to Q. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to plot these guys out. Okay, so this is 1/2 down. Even if you don't use the picture a whole lot, just drawing one out to begin with, I think makes the math a little bit more real versus just doing everything analytically with the numbers. Okay, so here's 1/2 down, and then so that's point P, and then point Q is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up 4. Another thing that drawing this out is going to help us with is that we're going to be able to tell whether our answer makes sense or not. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to connect these two guys here. Okay, so it looks something like that. And so look, a third of the way probably falls somewhere around here. Okay, so I know, like, if I get an answer out that's over in quadrant 2, I definitely did something wrong. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the total distance here. Okay, so if you look at the total distance, and actually for this problem I don't have to determine the actual point, I just have to determine the distance. So we actually don't even need to find this point, but we'll see if we can figure out how long this line is. Okay, so the distance between P and Q is given by, it's really the Pythagorean theorem, right? So if you take the distance between P and Q, which is this white line, I'm going to dot it yellow here. Okay, if you take that, we'll call that distance between P and Q. So if you square that distance, and if I take this and I create, there, close enough, and I create a right triangle by dropping down and over, I can tell how far each of these guys are, right? So if I take this guy squared, it should be equal to this length squared plus this length squared. So what are these other lengths? Well, this length goes from 1 to 5, so it's a length of 4. How do we get that? We take 5 and we subtract 1, and that gives us 4. That is our change in our x position. It's 4 units. Now let's look at our change in our y position. Well, our change in our y goes from -2 up to 4, so that's 6. So it's 4 minus a -2, which is 6. So if you take the change in the x and you square it and you add it to the change in the y squared, that'll be equal to your distance squared. So the distance formula, if we take the square root of both sides, is the square root of the change in the x squared plus the change in the y squared. Well, how do you get change in x and change in y? Well, we've already talked about that. Change in x is x2 minus x1, and change in y is y2 minus y1. And so x2, which is 5, you're going to see that these numbers, this 4 and this 6, are going to show up right in here. So x2 is 5, x1 is 1, y2 is 4, y1 is negative 2, and there's the 4 and the 6. So that's going to give me 16 plus 36, which is the square root of 52, it looks like. Okay, and so if we take 52, we can divide it by 4. So that's the square root of 4 times 13, which is the square root of 4 times the square root of 13, which is 2 square roots 13. That's the length here. So 2 square roots of 13 is going to be 7.2. So this length, this yellow line right here, is going to be 7.2 units. Okay, now the question asked, what is a third of that length? So if we take, to answer the overall question, if we take a third and we multiply it by 2 square roots of 13, we end up with 2 square roots of 13 over 3. And you might say, do I have to write it like this with the radical? And the answer is yes, because if you just leave it as 7.2, that's an estimate. That doesn't give us the actual length. That only gives us an approximation. This number right here is the actual length.